All right, so we are officially live. This is the first live stream. Just a small preview of this coming weekend. We do have a few very big meets. Some dampening news with the Texas relays, no LSU this year. That was kind of sad to see on the heat sheet, especially with all the promotions that we've seen. And a reminder of what happens this week. We saw that great walk down from Geron Flournoy. By the way, a Michigan kid, just want to throw that out there, anchoring LSU past Houston. So none of that will happen this year, unfortunately. Or maybe it will, just two different teams. But still going to be an exciting weekend, I think, for all levels of track and field, Texas relays, Florida relays, Raleigh relays. We'll get started here right away with the picture that you see when this live stream was getting ready to start. It was the Texas relays because that's obviously the biggest meet this weekend. And just pulling up the heat sheets, just going over, there are a few, races that I think we should, keep an eye on. Some bigger than others. But I think one of the most important races that we're going to see, obviously in the decathlon, you're going to see Leo Nussbauer. Things started good for him day one, excuse me, already, and he's already in the lead. So that's a huge win for them right out the gate. I think that, as I predicted in the preview, I think that this is kind of his event to lose. I don't really see anyone with the capability of challenging him. He has way too many quality skill sets. He is a great sprinter. He is a great thrower. He could jump very well. The only portion of his game I want to see him refine is his hurdling, but it's good enough because of his speed. Looking in our first event, I wanted to kind of highlight would be the 100-meter dash, the collegiate, because there is a collegiate race and there is a invitational race. Both are vital, both are important, but I think it's wise for us to focus on the collegiate race first because I think things will get interesting. Houston's going to have Sean Maswingani, and Devontae Burnett in the race. And I'm really curious to see what Houston does because they've been a little bit quiet. They've been using, I don't think they've been using their A guys, and they've still shown, some great depth. But I think this is where they'll get a chance to shine. None of the LSU guys will be here to compete, but they'll have, competition from an array of talent. But I think eyes will be on the Houston guys and then Texas Tech. I'm curious to see what they do in the 4x1. Texas Tech, as we know, is loaded. They had, I believe, five guys run 6.5 in the 60. That's simply just incredible because not too many teams can actually do that, but they can. And I honestly think that we're in the era in the 4x1 where everyone, the champion, not everyone, excuse me, but the champion should be running sub 38. And it's that's saying a lot because that means you have to average in order to 38 is everyone going 10 flat. And that would indicate that with a sub 38, you got someone running 9.9, 9.8 to, succumb for anyone running a 10.1 or 10.2. That is just insane. But Texas Tech can actually do it. I think Texas Tech may have actually two guys that run sub 10. So I think the 4x1 is going to be very interesting between those two. Ironically, two Texas schools. Trying to see what's Florida and Florida State going to do. We'll get an idea this weekend at the Florida relays, but sticking to the Texas relays, I think, the 100 and the 4x1 will be a major highlight uh, on their side of the fence. Another big event that I'm curious to see is what happens in the 110 hurdles. We're still waiting to see who's going to really be the guy. I have it, the preseason favorite, Philip Lamonius. I mean, he's the defending champion, but is he going to be the guy? He wasn't what we thought it was going to be this indoors. He was, not the big name. It was really kind of Caleb Dean. And then it was also Johnny Brackens of USC. Johnny Brackens will be at the Florida Relays because that's where the USC team is going. They're going way out east instead of stopping at Texas Relays. And that also brings me to another part of the discussion. Why can't the Florida Relays and Texas Relays have their meets on separate weekends? Why do they have to be the same weekend? I remember in 2022, I went to the Texas Relays my first time, and I look forward to going back soon and seeing Florida compete with everyone. And I thought this is great because not only was it, the notice of Florida here and Texas A&M and LSU and all these great programs, but it was the same way in the high school ranks. We saw teams from Tennessee. Uh, Obviously, you're going to see teams from Louisiana, Oklahoma, not sure, but to see Miami Northwestern at the Texas Relays, I mean, that was great. And I would like for us to have more of that because really do we get to see Florida and Texas kids compete outside of just what is championship. It'd be nice to see what regular season looks like. But back to the relays at hand, I do think the 4x1 is going to be an interesting race. I think Arizona State is going to have a strong team. I think Clemson is going to have a strong team. Is this the same Clemson as a few years ago? No, but it is still a solid program, and they're still really good at developing sprinters. Houston, I think obviously I've mentioned Houston and Texas Tech. They're going to have a very strong team. Again, no LSU, but there is Ohio State. And Ohio State is really becoming the preeminent power developing sprinters in the Midwest. They were that before. And then Karen showed up and has really reinvented the sprinters in the Midwest. I mean, she's done a phenomenal job. Granted, she's retired now, and her staff has kind of stepped in to take over for her. But she did a great job of developing a great sprint power again at Ohio State because they're back. They're very competitive. They can compete for national titles because they finished second or third just a couple years ago with the 4x1. Texas does have a strong team, but I think they've kind of been overshadowed because Texas Tech has been so good. Then you have, I think this is an opportunity for us to get more familiar with UCLA. They've kind of still been in the shadow of USC, but they've been slowly building and they're building a pretty solid program. And I think they'll give us some real strong performances this weekend. I'm expecting. And then one of my favorite races, because it's a big race in the state of Michigan, my home state, is the 4x2. And again, no LSU, but I still think there's strong programs. Houston's competing, Clemson will be competing, and the University of Texas. Curious to see what times we have. Will we see anyone rub sub 121, or could we see sub 120? I mean, that was something that we were seeing once upon a time, the late 90s, early 2000s, from schools like TCU and Tennessee. But they aren't the sprint powers. Tennessee's slowly getting back to being a sprint power, but they're not what they were back then. And that's when they had people like Justin Gatlin and Leonard Scott. So they've had some talent. The 4x4 at the Texas Relays is the very last event is always to me just such a great highlight. And I think because they're there and there's no Florida there, and this is the invitational race, I think we cannot ignore the greatness that is Arizona State. They have slowly but surely been chipping away at trying to be one of the preeminent powers, and they haven't lost this year yet. They've taken it to Florida 2 times at an invitational and at the national meet, and here they are in the 4x4 at the Texas Relays, and they're going to have Texas in their invitational heat. They're going to have a UCLA, a Texas Tech, a TCU, at a Clemson, and I'm strongly convinced that none of those programs can hang with Arizona State. I'm expecting Arizona State to run sub 3 minute and give us a 2:59 performance. And likewise from Florida, the Florida Relays. But I think this is kind of an event for Arizona State to kind of separate themselves from the rest of the field to prove that they are an elite group. Now, Clemson's going to have Therese Roden, a great 800 runner, Cameron Rose. They're going to have a pretty good group, but I don't think they have the strength at Arizona State. And likewise from Texas. Texas will begin things with Brian Herron, who was having a phenomenal year. Things didn't go well at USC. We know that he did not compete for his high school after a while because of changes with coaching. And Texas Tech's going to have Caleb Dean on the relay. So they're going to have some great legs, but can they hang with Arizona State? I don't think they can. But, can be corrected. And that is sort of the men's preview when it comes to the Texas Relays. I think, things will be a little quiet in the 4x8 because I honestly think because there's no LSU, I think Clemson's just going to have that sewed up. Clemson has great depth in the 4x8. I think the better 4x8 performances will probably be ran at the Raleigh Relays. So it'll be interesting to see what becomes of the 4x8. I would like to see some really good times pre-Penn Relays. I will be at the Penn Relays this year, and that's one of my favorite events. South Plains should have a pretty decent school, not school program. TCU, being coached by Kadivas Robinson, I'm almost certain they're going to have a pretty solid 4x8. Oklahoma, expected. In other individual events, I think another event we want to pay attention to is what happens in the long jump. Um, this is a great year for long jumpers, and specifically in the SEC, where you have uh, great jumpers from Arkansas, Florida, and then if we're going out the SEC, look at the ACC. You got Miami and Florida State. How some traditional football powers really producing great jumpers, but I think the long jump this year we're going to see a 28-foot jumper. I'm really banking on Wayne Pinnock being that. I really do think he has the skill set to be that 28-foot guy, and I'm anxious and looking forward to seeing it. But I think it'd also be a great event here at the Texas Relays. None of the big names are competing, but there is going to be the field in general, which should still be quality. Texas is going to have Stacy Brown and Zayd Latif. So I'm curious to see what they do now that they don't have to worry about competing against the real big names. And on the women's side, I think we're waiting to see what becomes of these sprint relay teams because no one has blown us away in the 4x1 yet. Granted, LSU and Tennessee have a 43-4. And when I mean blow away, I mean a 42-second 4x1. And I think this is probably going to be the meet where we see that. I think whether it's going to be the Texas relays or the Florida relays, I think the winner of those events, or excuse me, at those meets, will probably be running 42 seconds. And I think for the Texas relays, I think the strongest team heading in, as we look at it, since LSU's not going to be there, I'm going to keep reminding everybody of that because we're so used to seeing them. I think Ohio State is a team that you can't ignore. They run very well collectively. I think Texas is probably going to have a lot of eyes on them being the home school. They're going to have Kavana Davis. They're going to have Kanandra Davis, who we're still waiting to see kind of get her footing. She's, had moments of brilliance and then moments where I'm like, I still want to see more from her. Texas sprinters were just a tiny bit quiet this indoor season. Then you have the young talented freshman Micaiah Holland. They have a pretty solid group, but we haven't seen them together yet. And can they run sub 43? So I think that's going to be what's needed to win. I think Ohio State probably has the most consistent group. They look the strongest. And, you can't also ignore Arkansas. Woo! Can't forget them. Granted, we expect for them to dominate the 4x4. Let's get that out the way now. But they have some good sprinters to compete in the 4x1. But are they good enough to hang with the Texas? I think so. But I do think Ohio State, Arkansas, Texas, all eyes will be on them. They're both, strong with depth on their sprint programs. Now, a school that we can't ignore because they had 3 women run 7-1 indoors, and that's Texas Tech. We didn't see them perform the way we wanted them to, or I guess the way I expected them to at the national meet, but they still did well. What they have, though, is a lot of veteran talent. And so they're really 3 to 4 deep. So they may end up being the surprise team, even though I'm still leaning on it being between Ohio State, Texas, and Arkansas. I think we can't ignore Texas Tech because of that great performance indoors. But can it match outdoors? We'll see. And then the 4x2, I think you can't ignore Arizona State. They will have the really super freshman Adonijah Curry of who's from California, who I keep a lot of track of the California runners. I think they have probably the best high school system, with it being only one state champion, not a bunch of divisional champions. And she's, I think, a real talented 200-meter runner. She ran 23.3, 23.4 in high school. I think under that great coaching at Arizona State, she'll do well. I think Arkansas is probably going to be the favorite because of how well their 200-meter runners and their quarter milers ran indoors. I mean, they have 3 women on their team that ran sub 23 indoors. And that is serious depth. I mean, they got Rosie Effiong, they have Amber Anning, they have Nikisha Price. And let's not forget they have Kaylin Brown, Ariane Linting, Rachel Glenn, a bevy of talent. And then when you look at Texas, they're going to have Kivana Davis, who I think is going to be their big leg. And then you have Dejanay Oakley, who was the 400-meter champion Big 12. We're still trying to see what she's capable of doing. Just a talented young sophomore, but I think this is going to be Arkansas's event. I think this is where we also see them probably run a sub 131, maybe just putting that out there. Are we looking at a 130 point team? Probably. And then the 4x4, I think again it is Arkansas. I think Texas will have a nice team. I think Howard University will have a nice team. Ohio State will have a decent 4x4. But I think again it is in Texas Tech too. But I think again it is gonna be Arkansas. I think they're going to be kind of difficult to beat. They're kind of loaded. As we talked, all indoor, they have three runners that can already run 50 point. And in fact, and that's not including Rosie Effion because she ran 51 flat. So again, I think this team is really capable if they're pushed. They might even be able to run sub 320. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself there, but they might be able to do that. And I look at this, this heat sheet. You got Arkansas, BYU, Clemson, Houston, Texas, UCLA. And UCLA, you cannot sleep on. They have proven at the past couple of years that they have slowly but surely begun to close the gap between them and USC in that event specifically because they do have wins against them recently. So this will be a good UCLA team. I expect it to be. Now, that's what we got for the Texas relays. I think on the women's side, I'm curious to see what the 4x8 does produce, and I'm curious to see what the DMR. You have BYU there. What type of times are they going to be producing in the DMR? I think that's going to be because it's not as big outdoors as it is indoors, but DMR is still an exciting race, specifically because it is outdoors. The 12, the 4, the 8, the mile, and that's an event that BYU. Let's be honest, they kind of really own it. They're either winning it or they're the top on the women's side. They've been very consistent with their performances. Moving to the Florida relays, to me, the Florida relays kind of reads more as it's a better design meet because I think there's a day for relay events and there's a day for individual events. And I think this meet gets a little bit more eyes on the individual competition. And I think, there will be some performances that I'm really curious about, specifically in the men's 200. We'll be able to get to see Robert Gregory, and we'll get to be able to see Wanya McCoy, who did not have the end to the indoor season. I think he won, and I was really concerned, did he have an injury there? Because it looked like he kind of came up lame, and I'm like, oh, is that going to transition? Should he wait until maybe April? Because I think he's going to be, someone competing to make his national team. I think he's got a clear shot. I think Bahamas will have a great, I think, sprint team heading to the Olympics. If we get started, we'll look at the women's 200. I think that the big name that stands out to me, because I've been waiting to see her kind of step up since her transfer, and it's Layla Owens of Florida. She's been transitioned more into a 400 runner, but I think we can't ignore her talent in the 200. She's a mid 22 second 200-meter runner, and I think trying to just make her a 400 runner may not necessarily be the best. I'm not a coach, so let me not try to put myself in that position, but I do think she should get more looks in the 200. I think you're going to have a great group of 200-meter runners from USC. You're going to have Jasani Carter. You'll have Gentija Jones, a really talented 400 runner getting some short work in. And I think that's where the eyes are going to be when it comes to the 200. I'm still waiting to see who really is going to step out in that meet. I think we are pretty sure that it's going to be between Brianna Liston and Jamesha for who's competing. So let me throw that out there. She's going to run this weekend in that event. But who's going to hang with them? Is it just going to be Jason Sears? Because I think with it being outdoors, that the restraints of indoors, whether it's a mental restraint or the fact that running those tight turns don't really work, especially for the taller runners. With it being outdoors and you cannot hide, is this going to be an opportunity for us to see someone probably surprise us? I think Mackenzie Long is a name you cannot ignore. I think she'll do well. I also think one of the beautiful things about the Florida relays is that the distance runners will be, competing. A lot of really good, talented distance runners running this weekend. Some not necessarily in their main events, but it'll be interesting to see what's produced. I think in the women's 5,000, you're going to have from Florida, Caroline Bauer. Curious to see what steps up. Flamina Asico's going to run, I believe, the 800. She's going to step down, obviously work on some of her speed. But those two events to me really kind of separate themselves from other events in regards to individual competition. I think on the 4x1, we're going to be seeing Auburn against Florida State, which has a really good program. Look at this lineup for Florida State. The Jazz DeFran running the first leg, Kania Johnson second leg, Leanna Tyson the third leg, and Shanice Walker on the anchor. Walker, we know, had a really good indoor season along with Kania Johnson. So and DeFran. So this probably is one of the best Florida State teams we've seen, and none of them are upperclassmen. 3 sophomores and a freshman. Florida's running with Jayla Hollis, Anthea Charlton. Grace Stark is going to run the curb. And Kayla Davis, still waiting to see what she can do. I think she'll have a better outdoor season than indoors. And they don't have a 4x4 here today, Florida. And I'm a little shocked by that, but I don't see Ramia Elliott listed. She could be out with an injury. And we already mentioned at the beginning of the year, they were very thin in the 400. And I think also a name that, a school we can't ignore is Iowa. They've really become another really big sprint power in the Big Ten. And they're going to have a great, strong team this coming weekend in the 4x1 and in the 4x4. On the men's side, I think it is going to be between Florida, Auburn. And I think, admittedly, fan of Florida, but I don't think they have the legs that can hang with Auburn. Ooh-wee. Auburn opened up the season 38-7. And going up against a Florida team which doesn't have as many 100 legs as they've had in the past, but they have Javon Powell, their great quarter miler, running the first leg. They'll have Wanya McCoy in the backstretch. Is he healthy? They'll have Malik Smith-Band, the really talented youngster from Jamaica who ran, I believe, a 20.6 in high school. Curious to see what he does because, he had, I think, a slight early injury and kind of disappeared. And you have Robert Gregory on the anchor. Really, really solid lineup. But can it hang with the lineup that Auburn has? We saw what they did a couple weeks ago at a meet at Georgia Tech. I think seeing Nebraska with their superstar hurler Darius Love running the first leg, and Southern Cal, believe it or not, that is actually outside of Auburn my other favorite. They have Johnny Blackberger, Nicholas Miller, J.C. Stevenson, and Max Thomas, and that's not even their A group, but that's still a solid group. I think this is a real good year for USC. Really, really do. And I think the 4x8, Florida and Georgia Tech are going to have very strong teams. I'm curious to see what else, because right now they're the only 2 schools listed, but I'm pretty sure it'll change come the actual time of the race. In the field events, I'm curious to see what Alita Von Dalen does in the shot put. She, things that I don't think really went well at the national championship meet, but she did perform, actively. She had a great mark, but she went up against, Jelani Davis of Ole Miss and Maya Lesnar of Colorado State. But I do think that she is a real competitor. She can defeat them. She is a top performer. She had a strong freshman season. I think she's really kind of ready to step up for a great outdoor season. In the men's triple jump, I'm curious to see what Sean Dixon Bodie does. He had a lot of injuries indoors, a shortened season. I'm curious to see how he performs outdoors. And he, to me, really kind of is the guy on the outside looking in, but he should be on the inside because he has that type of talent. And I think this is where things kind of get started for him. I think he's going to put up a big mark. And in the men's shot put, you're going to have Kai Chang of Florida. You're going to have Cade Moran, a super freshman from Nebraska. But the big name, obviously, Dylan Taggart of South Carolina. Again, he's, to me, I mentioned him in the preview, the only person that's going to be able to challenge Tariq Robinson O'Hagan of Ole Miss. And this is where that gets started. So look for a big performance for him. One of the specialist things about this meet is that there's an open 400. And I'm curious to see who kind of takes the reign outside of Arkansas of having a really great 400. But I think that is still USC. They're going to have Takai Cincy competing. They're going to have Yemi John, the star of one of the great stars from Great Britain. Tyson Jones is going to run the 400, and she was going to have a busy weekend. She's run the 400 and the 200. But then you also have, let's see, South Carolina, because I wanted to see if Jamesia Ford was going to run. It doesn't look like she's going to run the 400. She's just going to run the 200, which is okay. And she's really talented. Obviously, she has a leading time nationally, 51:16, and I'm curious to see what she does in the 200 outdoors. But I think it's going to be between Yemi John and Jentaya Jones, especially if we're not going to see Jamisha Ford. And in the hurdles, this is Grace Stark. She's not going to have anyone from LSU to compete with, but she will have Nona Waldron of USC, a superstar freshman from my neck of the woods. And she's going to also have the woman who beat her indoors, and that's Jasmine Jones. So this is their first race outdoors against each other. Since I don't know if they've ran against each other outdoors, because either Jasmine has been absent or Grace has been absent. So what a great race that's going to be. Two very talented hurdlers. And then in the 4x4, which to me will be a great race on the men's side, although there's no Arizona State, we know where they're going to be at. They're going to be at the Texas Relays. I do think Florida is going to really face some decent competition. They're going to have South Florida. They're going to have Virginia Tech, because they're going to have Judson Lincoln on the anchor. They're going to have Nebraska. Penn State's always going to do well. And then they have Illinois. So no USC in that event. That's okay. But expect for them to really still put up a good time, because Virginia Tech is not going to let them win that easily, and neither is Penn State. But this should be an easy event for Florida. And on the women's side, I think it will be between USC. Let me scroll down. I do think it'll be between USC and South Carolina. And to me right now, South Carolina obviously winning it. I think they're going to have a very strong time. And that's sort of the Florida relays, what I have highlighted here. I think if I don't mention an event, it's not that I think it's going to be lame or that its performances are going to be low. It's just simply that I think those events that I'm mentioning are going to have the big time marks and performances. I do think a collegiate record may fall this weekend. I'm always thinking that, because that's kind of been the theme that I've been watching the past few years, that it's these old NCAA records that stood in the 80s and the 90s, 20, 30 years. We're seeing them finally fall. All in the game, Jamisha is such a special talent. So excited for her future. Any expectations for what she'll run in 200? I think Jamisha's going to run a 22 point. All in the game, I do agree with you. Will she be on both teams headed to Paris? No. I think to be honest, I don't think she's going to make the team. I think 200 and the 100 for Team USA on the women's side is probably the deepest we've seen them in a long time. We're going to have about 4 women run sub 22 at the Olympic trials just to qualify for Team USA, and only 3 of them are going to make it. And I don't think that she's going to be one of those. I think she's going to run a 22 point. I think the wise decision for her is to focus on running on junior Team USA, kind of like Karan Clement did back in the day when he was a freshman at Florida. He won an NCAA title, but instead of competing at the Olympic trials, Coach Holloway had him compete for junior Team USA, and that was very smart. And I think that would be smart for her as well. 22-0, 22-04, somewhere in that range is where I think Ford will run. She has a special talent, and the only person I can think that can challenge her is probably Brianna Liston. I'm curious to see what she does, but I think Liston's going to be in that same range. But Liston's going to have a really good 100-meter performance, I'm expecting. So I agree with you. She is an incredible talent. Now, getting back to the Raleigh relays to me, of the 3 relay meets, is probably the one with not as much eye-popping talent, but it still should be a good meet. I was looking to see on the heat sheets, is Parker Wolf going to run? And I did not see his name, but I wouldn't be shocked if he does run this weekend. I would like to see him run a 5K. If not, can he run the mile? I just enjoy watching Parker Wolf. I think he is really the next guy. He's chasing Nico Young and Kai Robinson. They're the big distance guys, but I think he's kind of the guy trying to catch up within that group. He proved himself indoors. He's been proving himself all indoor season. He had a great cross country season, but indoors he really kind of submitted himself. And I think this is another opportunity for him to perform well. I'm curious to see what he does this weekend. I'm also curious to see how my Eastern Eagles do on the distance events. They're at the Raleigh Relays. Only the distance group seems to be going, which is fine. The Raleigh Relays to me is more of a distance relay meet. Um, and that's where a lot of Florida State distance runners are going to be. Tennessee is also sending their distance runners. So there'll be in Michigan State. So there'll be, some pretty big programs, but will we get a chance to see Parker Wolf? That remains to be seen. We're going to learn a lot about the steeplechase this weekend. We'll have an idea of who the big gun is. I'm pretty sure if one of the three meets will have a great performance. But again, the expectation for me is that the Texas relays will be where we'll see most of our performance, our number one performances. Florida relays will be I think, a really strong second. And then I think third will be the Raleigh relays. I'll be at the Morehouse relays this weekend. Since I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm curious to see what becomes of that meet. However, I think that I hope in the future that there's more discussion between the meets orchestrators, organizers, about what can be done to eliminate having the meets compete against each other. The sport does not have a lot of eyes on it the way it should. Granted, let's be honest, having the NCAA championships meet live on ESPN does help. But we also need to focus on making sure our regular season gets highlighted as well. And having the Texas relays compete against the Florida relays, to me, that's counterproductive. What is wrong with having them in two separate weekends? Why can't someone have the beginning at the end of March and someone have the beginning of April? I mean, again, it worked well in 2022, and I got to experience the Texas relays and see the Florida schools compete at the Texas relays. Because as long as the Florida relays and Texas relays are at the same weekend, the Florida schools are going to the Florida relays. One, it's more cost effective and more time effective. Why not? I'm in the state of Florida. The Florida relay is almost like really close to Central Florida, so it's an easy travel for everyone. I think the other thing to take away is that we're still at the beginning of the season. Even after this weekend, I don't think we can really have the team title discussion yet. Um, we have, predictions. We think this is going to be a great Arkansas team. We also think this is going to be a great Florida team on the women's side. On the men's side, we think it's Texas Tech running away, and we can't really think that because we don't really know what everyone has. I mean, USC is not even sitting their A group, but the group they're sitting is still strong. So they're kind of proving to the country we have a lot of depth, the USC men. And what else can the USC men do? And is Florida going to pull up another surprise championship? Because they've been really hot when it comes to outdoor season. I mean, Genoa McIver is going to run the 400 this weekend. That may add to their 400-meter depth. Because last year we saw as the season progressed how their 400 runners kept getting better and better and better the closer and closer we got to the championship meet. And then they had the performance that we expected. They went 1-2. And that kind of helped them, along with winning the 4x4, to claiming a national title. Are they going to have that type of time again? Brianna Liston, Jamesia, Shanti, Adeja, Faber Ophili. Yes, they will be a fun rivalry, especially in the professional circuit. I think that's actually the future all in the game. I think that's where everything's going to be. I'm shocked that we're not going to see Shanti this weekend, which leads me to believe maybe she's injured. But I would really like to see her run on their 4x1. I think their 4x1 and their 4x2 Arkansas is going to be eye popping. I really think that Arkansas is running a sub 131. I think they got a 130.4x2, and I want to see it. I really want to see it 129 because we haven't seen a sub 130 performance since the great Oregon team a few years ago, which, by the way, I have a video of Oregon on this channel. Just, scroll through. It's in the shorts. But I think that's the future. Chris Arkansas better not let his Arkansas girls. No. And all in the game, I agree with you. And I said that on this channel in the video. That was a mistake because they did not have the legs in the 200. And then they were too tired to run the 4x4. And I was like, I think and this is me, I think what should have happened is perhaps maybe Rosie Effiong should have been the only 200 runner because she ran that 22.5, and I thought, oh, she's going to be competitive. And had she not had the 400, she would have still been competitive. She would have been third or fourth, and they would have gotten the same amount of points because they ended up getting all of last place positions. The runners were too tired. Better not do that again. And he's kind of made the mistake, and you're mentioning it here with Britton Wilson. I thought that was a mistake last year. I don't want to question his coaching because he's a phenomenal coach. Let's put that out there. Everywhere he's been, he's done a great job. But that was a mistake, having her run the 400 hurdles. Honestly, I think she's a stronger 400 runner than she is a hurdler. I'm still waiting for her to get to that point because if you're running a 49 in the 400 indoors, you could probably run a 48 outdoors, which would indicate to me you should be running, 51 in the 400 hurdles. And she wasn't even under 53. I really don't think she's as strong as in the 400 hurdles as she is in the 400. This is an Olympic year, so she's probably nailed down and focused solely on her technique. But if I'm her agent, can we just focus on the 400? I mean, you ran a 49.48. Ma'am, you are a 400 runner, not a hurdler. 400 runner. Because she can run 48. Heck, she might even be able to beat Sydney. I know that's blasphemous, but let's keep it real. 49.48 last year. Last year indoors. Imagine a full professional season. I legit think she's running a 48 outdoors. So that's my expectation, is that we'll see Britton Wilson really step it up. I think this will probably be the deepest women's 400 team we've had. I'm looking forward to seeing Team USA's women. I know we're getting off our college track, but Team USA women in the 400, this is probably their best shot at breaking that great American record. That was a great team in 1988. And again, that would stick with the theme of breaking these old records because it's sat since 1988. I was 1 year old. So it's been there for 36 years. I think it's time for it to fall. But that is going to be our preview video. This was the first live stream, so I plan to upgrade and do more. I want to put our 4-leg format to this. Maybe we'll do live streams to every weekend, every preview meet or preview video to every weekend. We'll probably do a live stream. More to come. I will see you Monday or Sunday night, and we will talk about what we saw this weekend, which I'm hoping that we'll get at least one national record, but also keep an eye on that high jump. What will Rachel Glenn do? All right. Thank you for your support, and next time. Okay.